It's a bit like doing a parachute jump counting. Right, I think we're there. I think we're there. Hello, everyone. Our guest today, Phil Packer, describes himself as a charity ambassador for disability, mental fitness, and well-being. Well, given the extraordinary list of feats he has undertaken to raise funds for charity, I think you could justifiably add living legend to that title. And if I were to list all of those feats, we'd never actually get to the actual interview. But a smattering might include rowing the Channel, scaling the vertiginous El Capitan, completing the London Marathon, thrice actually, walking 2,012 miles through every county in Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And in the process of all of these and his many other endeavours, he's raised countless sums for charity. But there lies much more to our guest today behind those impressive achievements. For each challenge was undertaken and completed despite seemingly insurmountable odds. 15 years ago, Major Phil Packer was told he'd probably never walk again. It was 2008. He was a major serving in Her Majesty's forces on operational duty when he was involved in a rocket attack, sustaining serious injuries, including catastrophic damage to his spinal cord. It was after an emergency operation that he was told that he could expect never to walk again. But Phil had other ideas. It were as if, from his hospital bed, he began a new life all over again, where physical strength had, for the time being, been so abruptly robbed of him, and indomitable inner strength emerged. To regain his sense of self-worth and to prove he could still contribute, Phil, more or less there and then, set a target of raising £1 million for charity. By October, that very same year of the rocket attack, Phil was plummeting through the air in a tandem skydive with the Red Devils, and that was just for starters. Further audacious pursuits, which we'll be talking about, all contributed to raising well over that £1 million, rightfully earning him recognition as Fundraiser of the Year award at the Pride of Britain, BBC Sports Personality of the Year, and ultimately honoured with an MBE in 2010. Typically, Phil has always attributed his recovery and these extraordinary accomplishments to having an amazing team behind him. You know, even skimming the surface in this introduction, I feel it already says something of the Herculean mental strength of a man whose immense fortitude and positivity shines through in this comment in his early days following his operation, when he said, "I got a second shot at life." I don't think any of us will ever forget that. Phil, hello, and can I introduce you to everybody here?
Thank you very much indeed for having me today, Rosie.
Right, let's skydive straight in by going to the heart of what you might feel is the main drive behind all these extraordinary achievements, and whether perhaps it's the same propulsion that has been with you all your life.
I think I'm driven by certain things. Sort of injustice is a big one for me. I think from childhood to a career as a Royal Military Police officer, to, I suppose I'm not so much a campaigner now, but mental health, well-being and inclusion are very important subject areas for me. So I think there's a running thread of I think duty and I need to have purpose in my life as well, and that was very structured pre-injury because of serving in uniform, and I think I need it more now than I ever have before. So I think they are the kind of they're the main bits. I think that everything else is that's the kind of structure, I think, to how
it's interesting that you're saying that was sort of there all along, because it's almost, correct me if you feel very differently, but it's almost as if your amazing life has sort of divided into two volumes, as it were, pre-injury, post-injury. And if we can go back to pre-injury and your younger your family and your background, do you think that with these sort of forces in your life, were there any great influences there too?
Yeah, huge influence, and still now. So the relationship with my mother and my sister, they are probably the strongest, with my grandparents as well.
And Ben, we have a picture there of the family.
Yeah, but yeah, so embarrassing. The only ones I could find, I've got nappies on, but but my mother, my mother has, it's just been sort of like a rock, and was pre-injury, but also with my stepfather Mike, they were the ones that got the knock on the door from the Ministry of Defence to explain what had happened, and then were driven to Selly Oak Hospital in Birmingham. So that support mechanism around me, again, it's that layer of safety,
yes,
that they have provided.
Actually, safety and care and love. And with that around you, what was it then that took you into the army? Why did you go? Because you were in the military for some 17 years, wasn't it?
Yeah, by the way, the other picture is of my uncle, my mum's brother, who, again, just need to say that has been such a constant influence, positive influence. So family, it's that unconditional love that you can just be who you are, and I'm very lucky to have that family support around me. Sorry, Rosie, I for many different reasons, and there were some negative areas of my childhood. Actually, I sometimes feel it's not really for me to say, but it was my mother who endured so much pain for decades until we were able to get away, and I think that's why we have a very close bond, my sister, my mother, and myself.
And possibly why you have a strong sense of justice too.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, and I think that when I left school with very few qualifications, and I think the influences at home may have contributed to that, and I felt quite lost, really, for a few years, and then I think when I was 20, I realized that I needed structure. I walked into a recruiting office and joined the army as a private soldier.
And here you are, Ben. Have you got that picture of Phil in his combat? Yeah. Yes.
So I was very lucky that after a couple of years, I was invited to almost like a fast track to go to Sandhurst from the ranks rather than go in as a graduate. So at that time I was 25, so a little bit older, but had a little bit of military experience behind me, and that was a complete. It was the most amazing experience.
Sounds more like your ability than a bit of luck, as you characteristically modestly say.
It was just you know, obviously at Santos, they're included in that is study, and I absolutely loved it. Everything about that was offered, because I just felt like in a safe environment, and where I didn't have that concentration level at school, I just loved that. I loved it, absolutely loved it, and it really ignited so many different passions and interests that I maybe laid dormant or I didn't have before. So
and who is the lady on the left who I think was an influence in your military chapter too?
There have been many, and I think when you're serving, it's, I suppose, because of the environment, it fosters very strong relationships, you know, in different operational environments.
Yes.
So there have been many. However, when I knew I was going to be deploying, I was able, to a degree, to think through the leadership team that I would be taking. And because we had a very high, pleasingly, a very high percentage of women that I was deploying with, I felt that I needed a very strong leader to support and look after the woman that we're deployed with. And Kat, in fact, I had served with her husband, and I felt it was appropriate to ask Mick if it was okay to ask Kat, like, she'd come to Germany and then deploy with me. I just felt it was out of courtesy. I'd be taking someone's wife away for a long period of time, and she was amazing. But she also didn't leave my side when I was injured, and she directed that she would be coming back with me when the Royal Air Force flew me back to Selly Oak Hospital to hand me over to my family. So you know, a very close friend and a very close bond, because that 9-hour flight, she sat by my side when I really didn't know what was going on.
Yes,
so you know, she's an amazing lady.
A very precarious time as well, and if you are comfortable to do so, can you tell us exactly what had happened, how you ended up in that helicopter, what happened when you were on operational duty?
Yeah, so I mean, I you know, I always sort of say I had a certain amount of responsibility, because overnight that's taken away. And also I you know, my role was commanding quite a lot of people who I felt I had responsibility for, and being the person that you never think it's going to happen to you, one of the hardest things was with no control of leaving them there, you know, and that always played on my mind, I think. But yeah, it was so I was involved in an incident where I sustained a motor complete, initially, spinal cord injury, which obviously there's forgive me, there's motor complete, motor incomplete. So motor incomplete is there's movement, and I'd also suffered sort of damage to the chest, heart, and it's kind of easy to sort of put it into spinal cord damage. But I think that after being, when I received medical attention on operational theatre, when it's spinal cord injury, then they cannot do anything there. So I had to be flown back, and actually, you know, I owe a huge amount to the Royal Air Force, because they then flew me back the next day during a rocket attack.
Wow.
Which was, you know, one thinks a huge risk, and then I was flown into Selly Oak, which is the kind where everybody comes into from operational theatre if they have been injured or wounded. And then there was a decision that I'm very fortunate, by the way, that I have an extended family who are in the medical profession. And my brother-in-law's best friend was a spinal cord surgeon, spinal injury surgeon, who advised that the sooner the better to undergo surgery. And he was based in Leeds, but I was thinking about the longer term, and I thought it'd be better to be near my family in the south. So there were a number of phone calls were made over a weekend, and when you're outside of a specific NHS trust area, you can be, I think sometimes you can be claimed by a surgeon. And Jan Lachowski at the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital in Stanmore agreed to operate on me. So I was transferred to Stanmore. I'm mentioning names because they had such an impact on me. So my consultant was Angela Gall, who was just incredible. And the doctors and nurses on a spinal injury unit, it's almost a kind of it's more likely that that's the area that they specialize in, and yes, as in they you know, so that their bedside manner and the way they are to kind of give assurance. Angela had said it's highly likely that you will walk again, because my injury at that time was motor complete and sensory incomplete. So I had pain, but no movement. And then I can't quite remember how many months it was, but my injury went from motor complete to motor incomplete. I put that down to Jan Lachowski and the surgical team.
Well, I think one could put it down to your wonderful team, but also your own grit and determination, right? Because, you know, you're already, it sums it all up in your face here, your gritty determination to, you know, there's an immense.
But I don't think I don't think one can control how that went from motor. It certainly wasn't me, the motor complete to motor incomplete. There are, when there is a spinal cord injury, my understanding is that there is swelling, like there would be with any bruising, and that is a lot of fluid, and it's kind of like the body protecting to a degree. And I think that in addition to the surgery, when that started to calm and heal, perhaps then that was when that element of going from motor complete to motor incomplete happened. But the muscle wastage of 5 months in hospital, I've never got that back. And I talk very openly about the other areas of the spinal injury. So because it's very important to destigmatize, particularly for young people who find it very hard to talk about some personal areas of their medical condition. So I don't have any bladder or bowel function, so I self-catheterize. I don't have any temperature regulation, and coming from a excuse the fan, which you can probably see is on just to keep me cooler, but it's, you know, I can conform and wore uniform and different dress codes for years, but now if I can't control my temperature and it lowers or it goes up, there's nothing I can do about it apart from try and change the environment. So these little things, and pain management, taking pain medication daily is going to have an effect on, you know, not that you rattle around with pills, but there are. Yes,
you have to you have to learn all over again about how to live your particular life the way you best can, I suppose, is the way we can only imagine it. And I mean, this picture here, for instance, of, you know, climbing stairs, the equivalent of summiting K2, you know.
I think, you know, when some of the pictures, the reason why I want the one before that was this is in Stanmore with the amazing occupational therapy team, because the idea is that you get to a point where you can live independently, perhaps with some support. And Stanmore, and I'm sure like any other spinal injury unit, that's part of that process, is to get you to that point that you are able to live life.
Well, this is very interesting that you mentioned about the independence, because, you know, you had been independent up until this point, and then suddenly you're completely reliant for quite a long time on this amazing team around you. So I can kind of understand what happened next, which was that you set in your mind this challenge because you wanted to rediscover your self-esteem, your self-worth, etc., by throwing the gauntlet down at yourself and setting yourself this huge challenge. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. By the way, the photo before this one that you saw was that was at Headley Court, the rehabilitation centre, and again, that was a lady called Kate Sherman, who was a physiotherapist, and I mean the NHS team and the team at Headley Court. You're going through all these different emotions, but what I knew. Sorry, Rosie, just to say, I knew at Stanmore that I was never going to go back into uniform. I just knew it. Because of the job, and because of, I think there are only 4 buildings in the whole of the MOD that are wheelchair accessible, because operational buildings would not be, because you wouldn't expect someone to have a disability. So I just knew that I would be looked at differently. It would, at that time, I thought I was going to be a wheelchair user in the longer term, and I think I had made that transition in my head that I wasn't going to be in uniform anymore, even though I went to Headley Court and they provided that support. So your self-esteem and self-worth is like rock bottom. It really was. And I think when I just didn't want to be written off, the way to do that was to say, well, I'll support the wounded then. I'll raise money, I'll do something and explore what I am capable of doing with the limitations that I had at that time. So that's kind of how it started in a way. And
no sooner almost had you set your cap, so to speak, at this, then some devils came into the scene, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, it's probably, after having a spinal injury, it's probably not the wisest decision to make, to go and do a tandem skydive. And actually, one of those challenges is that I can't lift my legs.
Mm.
I didn't have that power in my legs. So I understand now that there is a special harness where you can pull cords that lift your legs as you're going to land. But Billy, who I was attached to, when we came down, slid on his bum to protect me and my injuries. But had we have come down harder, in hindsight, that you know, and when I think about it now, it was amazing. The whole of the Red Devils team were fantastic, but I think one has to be very careful about risk and about making a situation worse with you know, yeah, that very reason. You know,
yes. Well, it was an incredible start, wasn't it? And in respect, you were as close as you could be to getting back into uniform. You were certainly up against some, so to speak, and you were already gathering a lot of support and admiration for your whole approach to this sort of new volume to your life. And down the line and over various events that we'll talk about, some key figures came in to support you, didn't they? And I think in our next slide we have a picture of somebody slightly later on, but you'll still recognize who it is standing next to you.
Yeah, yeah.
The great Saran Fiennes.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose military career and in personal life, you follow people's exploits and achievements, and I think that you know, I always had huge admiration. I think when I was rock bottom, well, I could say rock bottom, but when I was in a hospital and I was really struggling, I think a number of people wrote to ask a number of people that might inspire if they would just drop a note. And that's kind of how it started. And you know, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that I'm in regular contact with Saran, but when you read words from somebody that give you that spark to say, do not write me off, is you know, certainly that voice from Saran, whether he understood at the time the impact that his words had, they did have a huge impact. And
I do have his words here. Would
do
you
you?
like me to read them out?
No, not really, but it's only because there are some.
But it
well, you
is in
can-
admiration of your determination and strength of mind.
Okay, yeah, because there's, yeah, I think there are some words that some people sent in that obviously it's a very emotional time, and you lock that away, and then when
Yes.
someone reads it, or you look and think, I forgot about that, and it strikes a chord. But you know,
Yes.
he also, I know we'll talk about it later, but he has really, bearing in mind he's very passionate about the charities that he supports, as are many people, and also his exploits, and you know, his own, all the things that are going on in someone's very busy life. He's very kindly backed what I've been trying to do for over a decade, and I really appreciate that support, as has there are a lot of people that, you know, either behind the scenes or involved, and
Well, one of them includes somebody that I also know, a slightly younger generation, a great adventurer, Al Humphreys,
yeah,
who I'm not sure whether to actually blame him for the next challenge that you took on, which looks it looks uncomfortable for anybody anyway to row across the channel.
yeah.
It looks like you're setting off in the middle of winter, Phil.
This is actually at Docklands, because strangely, which sounds very unprofessional, Al thought I was a rower, and I thought Al was a rower, and we had managed to source an ocean rowboat, and I had asked Simon Goody, who was a British rowing coach, if he would help us just to get the stroke in. And when we went to the Docklands and we first got in, I wasn't quite sure which way, you know, like as you're trying to put the oars in, I'd asked Al a very simple question. He said, I was, you know, thinking I was teasing. And I said, no, seriously, Al, I've never been in a boat like this before. So this was 2 weeks before we were going to set off. Yeah, so there's a little bit of like poor communication of understanding our experiences. But Al Humphreys, who has achieved some extraordinary feats, is one of the most relaxing, take it in their stride, not flustered, but very, very thoughtful, and yeah, just an extraordinary person to be in the presence of, and
a great sense of humor in him.
Yeah, hugely, yeah,
Very great strength.
And what was great is, obviously we didn't know how long it was going to take, and at the time I was still reliant on the wheelchair to a degree. I hadn't quite broken away from being able to not use it altogether, but
which must have meant some tricky modifications. And if we look at the next visual, you get more of a close-up of, you know, there's no mean feat in itself getting in.
So that seat, you'd normally expect it to be flat on an ocean rowboat, but this is a kind of, you can get them on adaptive rowers, and that little seat to the right hand side, it just protects the lower back and has a little padding around it. So that was one modification. And because I didn't have I don't row with my legs, I row with my arms and my, you know, shoulders back, and obviously a huge proportion of energy and effort normally comes from the legs. So I think, you know, when we took it in turns a little, and then we did obviously row together, but I'm not the fastest rower. And also we chose completely the wrong time of year to go, because it was Valentine's Day 2009, and it took us about 45 minutes to an hour to get out of the harbour in Dover. And I think at that time I just thought, she's not going well at all. But it's obviously all to do with the swell and the current and all those sorts of things. But
but
it was,
did you, I mean, Al as well to a degree, but maybe particularly because of the posture that necessary for you to maintain. Did you get, throwbacks like sort of sore bottom, quite frankly?
well, in all honesty, Rosie, I can't feel it, mine.
Okay, so you might have done it, didn't it? But
Yeah.
and what about seasickness too?
I didn't. Al, nightmare, and just nightmare, and I think it's because it doesn't take a lot just to have, and it was quite smooth there, but it was quite challenging. But if you don't throw up outside the boat, it stays in the boat. So you've obviously, it's not the most pleasant experience to have all that going on around you, around your feet.
Yes.
And, it's hard. But
if somebody's leaning over the boat, Phil, and it's slightly choppier than this visual indicates, isn't there a risk that you could capsize? And if you capsize, what's going to happen to you? Because will that particular boat rewrite itself?
Yeah, and I'm not an expert here, and so I stand to be corrected. But the cabin is sealed, and that's obviously, I don't know who that. I think that's me. Al would have been inside, and we just took it in turns. But obviously, because there's air in there, that it will self-right. Also, you're clipped in, so that when if it does, whether or not you brace yourself when you do go over, but you still be clipped in for the other person to help you. And I appreciate we only rode the channel, but I think for me at the time, this was about what I could do at the time with that disability, because of not having bladder bowel function. And I've always found this with the people I've done these different things with, there's so much understanding of making sure I'm okay and I'm comfortable with that person. And I think in these kind of situations, someone like Al, he just really compassionate, and it's so appreciated, because it shouldn't, then I think it should be embarrassing about the way that you have to do certain things. And I think I've been very lucky to have very compassionate people around me who have enabled me to explain.
I think even, Phil, dare I say, in any sort of extreme expedition, you have to be comfortable with one another in that respect. And I wondered, the reason why I chose this out of some of your visuals was because thinking of you out there on night watch at the times that Al was either throwing up over the side or asleep, talking of companionship, this was a time that you'd have been on your own, and were you actually comfortable in the company of your own thoughts? You since your injury, you had almost been in a kind of, not a frenzy, but a lot of thinking going on, ideas and planning, and then suddenly here you are. Were you comfortable?
Well, interestingly, that although it looks like we're out in the middle of nowhere on our own, that wasn't the case. There was a safety rib, and there was also a crew from ITN who wanted to cover this, who had hired a motor boat as well. So there were 3 vessels in total. So I can honestly say I did not feel like I was on my own in the middle of nowhere. But at the same time, the minute I feel I've committed to something, I want to finish it. And I would, in some ways, I would rather have just been me and Al, because I think it's not about having a camera around you. I think sometimes you just want to do things without all that going on.
Well, it's part of the journey, isn't it? Traveling on different trajectories. Not just the physical side, but the psychological and the mental side, and testing yourself out in that respect too. Then moving on, because you've done so much, we're in our own race against time, but if we can just cover some of the marathons.
Yeah. So very
Marathon number one, I think.
Yeah, it is. And so basically this is one of the 3 challenges to raise the million. And at that time I was initially I had met someone at Stanmore, Paula Craig, who is a elite wheelchair athlete. That's one of the things that she has done, of many. And at the time I had thought that that was going to be the only way I could do the marathon. But obviously then, being very fortunate to have the motoring complete and the opportunity to be able to walk again, my consultant Angela said, I need to limit you to 2 miles a day. So I had to ask London Marathon if it will be possible to have longer to complete it. And I kind of, on the basis that the guy in the diving suit had taken quite a long time. So, you know, could I? I now know that the one thing about taking longer, and I think there is an 8-hour limit now, maybe I think London Marathon, is when you get around that first corner, the roads are closed. And they've opened again because everyone's run off, and then you're taking time, and of course you're on the pavement, and it's not a London Marathon course. You're following the course, but you're wearing a number, but you're not part of the other bit.
So it gets even slower and more challenging in a way, because all those obstacles.
But this was kind of, you know, I can't quite remember now, but my parents and some supporters were following each day, and the support, financial support from the public, I don't recall quite how much was raised cash, but it was considerable at that time. But I think it was in the region of about £500,000 over those 14 days, purely just because of the kindness and generosity of the public. With the shaky bucket, shaky tin thing, which I think is very different now because people don't really carry cash. So, but it was just, yeah, it was a hugely, I didn't obviously expect all these people at the end, but it was just very emotional, and it really shaped me going forward, I think.
I think that because when you do something once, you don't often know fully what you're in for, but to do something twice in some respects is yet braver, because you know what you're in for. And you did the marathon 3 times, and each time you bettered your time, but in a way, I don't mean like everyone else bettering their time by minutes or whatever. You bettered it from, let me get this right, the first time it was 2 weeks, 13 days. The second time was with 26 young ambassadors, and for their 26 charities, and you did it in 26 hours.
Yeah.
And the third time you did it in 14 hours, I think. Was that right?
Yeah, the third one wasn't a London Marathon. It was a marathon distance in London, because I was going to take 14 hours and I'm not allowed to do it.
That's right.
I think over the years they've given permission for specific things, but I can understand as well. I was very, very lucky, because there is a safety piece there about are you part of it or not, and do they have a responsibility for your safety if you're going to take longer? And I can completely understand that. So I think at that time, I'm very grateful to London Marathon for the 2 opportunities I was given. The third, I just had to kind of like, you know, sort it out myself, really. And they're all for very different reasons. I think the second one was hugely impactful on my life, because I'd chosen 26 charities, some that I had a really close relationship with, and others I wanted to learn more about disability. So each charity very kindly invited a young ambassador to walk with me, to talk, walk or wheelchair with me, to talk about, to let me understand more about how they live their life.
And
from
Ben, if we could bring up that collage of the marathons, we will see. There we
yeah,
go.
and
Yeah.
then the last stretch we all walked together. It was just and they came with their families and their friends, and each of those miles that, you know, one young ambassador, I'd like to think we really raised awareness of each of those charities, and it was really joyful. And I mean, for me, you know, it's very emotional, because
It's joyful, and the wonderful thing is it's joyful for you, of course, but it's joyful for everyone participating, and it's wonderful for people who are supporting you. But and also and Ben, I'm keen to not miss out on this visual wise, so we might skip to the picture of the intermittent challenge you took on during these marathons, which is really quite startling. You decided to summit El Capitan. Everybody don't know if you're familiar with this rock, but we're talking 2,308 meters of sheer rock face. Now, Phil, in a word, how?
Well, I actually, when I was Andy Kirkpatrick, the year before, had summited with Dr. Karen Dark, sorry, and Karen used almost the exact technique that I did. Karen, by the way, is a Paralympian and an adventurer and an explorer, who she's just an extraordinary lady. But I just need to say that, you know, this wasn't the first time it was done. Karen had done this, and with Andy. So when Andy said, "Would you like to do this?" This was an experience that I had never dreamed of before. So Andy and Ben Pritchard and Paul Tattersall and Ian Parnell were the four climbers who did each pitch before me. And then that rope, there's a pulley system, and then I'm in a paragliding seat, which obviously is protecting me and has got all the little bits and pieces that I need. And that's how we did it. I just sort of like dangled below, and then when I was told to do the pull-ups, just do the pull-ups. But
well, I picked up on the internet that was 3,250 pull-ups. And also, it didn't just take the day, everyone. It took 4 days. So what have you got to do and fit in between? Sleep. Ben, can you show the slide that terrifies us?
Well, I mean, it's really weird because I don't have vertigo, but I do think I have a little bit of edge fear. But I always wanted to be the one sleeping closer to the mountain. It makes no difference. But you know, not that I wanted to be spooned, but I just kind of, I don't know what it is about wanting to be closer, but because you've got, you know, but this is the portal edges that you sleep and you rest on.
Well, I'm right there with you about being the snuggest one to the edge, but you do look snug. You look as happy as a sleeping baby just there. And if you, Ben, can you bring up what I call the vertigo slide? that gives me, what did you call it? Edge concern?
Edge. I don't know if it's a technical term, but I think going up slowly, you're almost kind of getting used to things. I think it's like every morning or in the morning when you're sort of, you're on the portal edge, and then you have to leave that and then swing out. It's the edge fear piece that I was getting a little bit anxious about. But I had no responsibility.
When you said anxious, you didn't use the word fear, and I wonder, did you lose, even if you had fear before associated with anything else, did you lose a lot of your fear and your, dare I say, your fear of death after your injury?
I don't know. I've never really thought about that, to be honest. What I would say about this is that it's about trust. I didn't have any responsibility for any of the rope work or any of the climbing of El Capitan. I was just there to pull myself up behind. But you are putting all your trust technically into those big wall climbers. And yes, I think there's anxiety, but maybe about sort of taking in the whole situation, but it's the team around me that enabled me to do it. And at the hardest bit actually was, for me, was going down the other side, because that took, I know how long it took, 8-9 hours, but sometimes I had to go down on my bum. Sometimes I had people almost holding me up because it was, it's more forest towards the bottom, but it's more rock towards the top, and it's just wet, unstable, and quite dangerous actually. And I found that, and kept falling over, the hardest part of it, just the frustration a little bit. Yeah, anyway, sorry.
Well, visually it is very impactful, and with that and your marathons, you raised already, correct me if I'm wrong, but you superseded your 1 million target and raised 1.3 million. So, and inspired an awful lot of people in the process. So you deservedly scooped up Fundraiser of the Year award at the Pride of Britain. I think this is it. Closely followed by the BBC Sports Personality of the Year, the Helen Rollason Award. And here you are being, interviewed by the BBC. And it was all fantastic publicity for your fundraising campaign. And very quickly, because surprise, surprise, we're running out of time, you're not the sort of person to rest on your laurels after all of this. And you went on to do the 3 peaks, as Sir Steve Redgrave in there on the bottom right picture. He keeps popping up because he met you at the end of the first marathon as well. And what was it? Not the 3rd marathon, another event, but he's always popping up to make sure you're okay. Then you walked, this is epic, you walked 2,012 miles through every county of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, including the Isle of Man, Alderney, Jersey, Guernsey, and Shetland. How long did that take you, Phil?
331 days.
300, golly, as good as a year, but you had a very good reason why you were doing it.
Yeah, so I in 2010/11, I founded the British Inspiration Trust. I had got my self-esteem back from being asked to be a patron and ambassador to a number of different charities, Prince's Trust, UK Scouting, things like that. And I just felt there could be more collaboration, and I really wanted to try and bring people together. But I wanted to run the charity differently. I feel volunteering is very important within the charity sector. So since that,
can you bring up the charities there?
Yeah, so
placing it on people's minds.
So what I decided to do was not to take a wage as the CEO, be non-paid, and we don't employ any staff. So it's reliance on volunteer or professional services wherever we can. But I was asked in pre-2012, do you understand the different challenges that young adults and students face in the UK? And the answer was no, I don't. I knew what I wanted to do, which was, to support young people who've gone through trauma, mental, physical. But where do you stop with what that trauma is? So that long walk to go to every county and spend time with a special school, specialist college, uni, college, charity, community, was every day of that walk. I was with parents, young people, teachers, talking about the different challenges that young people face from the Highlands and Islands, which would be very different to central London or Cardiff or Edinburgh. And I think that changed everything for me, because when I came back, I had so much information about what I was going to do and how I wanted to take the charity forward. I've always wanted the charity to be shaped and steered by young adults and students. And that's how Brit has evolved since then. to where it is now, which is it is to deliver an annual inclusive challenge for every university college and specialist college to be part of. Always takes part at the beginning of the year. It's always themed on the year, and it's not just about physical activity, it's about well-being. So we want students and young adults and staff to be able to take part, whatever their ability. Everything.
And there will be people listening who will either themselves, or they'll have family, or they know people who would be very interested in this and participation. So where should they go? Where should they look to? The website, etc.
It's britishinspirationtrust.org.uk. And we have ambassadors. We have, as well, Rosie, we have 200 Olympians, Paralympians, elite athletes, explorers, adventurers, and they are invited to become part of the Brit Ambassador family. We've got 200. I'd like it to be 800, but it's about capacity of all those relationships. But ideally is to have one Brit Ambassador per university college and specialist college, and the ambassador chooses which one they'd like to support because there's a personal link, or they may have attended, or it's around the corner, and to talk about everything, the resilience.
I see, sorry to interrupt, Phil, I see here, because we're closing in on time, but there is a question about it from Annie here about, is there an age limit? Could you clarify that for the Brit participation?
Well, it's, as in who we're supporting?
Yes, or participation, yeah.
Well, it started off, interestingly, Annie, it started off as young adults. Now it's young adult students, and obviously there are mature students, but it is students, and now it is young adult students and staff, because the mental health and well-being of university, college and specialist college staff is just as important to the successes of their students. So now we have a whole university and a whole college approach to well-being is what we're trying to promote, and what I've tried to do with the engagement side of things. I'm constantly learning, constantly. I think any charity should, but for me it's about collaboration, and I'm very fortunate to have been provided support from as in championing what we're doing, from pretty much, I think, all of the education governing bodies, quite a lot of the sport governing bodies in the UK, and that has really assisted in establishing the charity.
You've worked it out so well here, Phil, and somebody is asking, relevant to that, whether you yourself personally have any other challenges lined up for yourself planned that will help raise funds or draw attention to Brit?
It's a really interesting question. I feel that I don't want to be that person. I think that what my experiences of the physical challenges before was a journey, and I was awareness raising, but I think with the charity, having a face of the charity, that's not what Brit is about. It's about the young people, and having those ambassadors means that Rosie, your relationship with, for example, Essex, university is that's how we can raise awareness, or by asking the ambassadors if they're comfortable to work with the different institutions. I think that doing another physical challenge, I spend about half the year on the road visiting and that for me now is quite a long stint away, and I'm at the back of the charity, sort of trying to make things work. And if I were to go and do another physical challenge, it would take me away from what I do now, which is leading the charity. And I think on the awareness raising, knowing that social media can be so damaging to the mental health of students and young adults, and actually to inspirational figures who feel compelled that they've got to share content, I shy away from it, because I feel that can I take the charity forward without that reliance? And actually that really means that you're almost in a grassroots position of building momentum to establish the charity to continue to deliver what we're doing without the necessity of constant content coming through the charity. Because actually the activities that are taking place at a college or a uni or specialist college are those students and their staff activities. So if they want to share it, that's lovely, but I don't want to put that demand on people, because I think it's an unnecessary pressure.
And also you and Brit itself have evolved.
Yeah. So slightly different in the way we operate, which, sometimes you just meet the right people who open the doors to someone who might want to support with funding or donating, or they might know someone who's got a business that would actually like to get involved to support and sponsor. I like the organic way that works, rather than knock on the door of someone that doesn't know me at all. And that's not, sometimes you just want it to be.
Well, I tell you what, Phil, I'm going to be taking the Brit banner with me on my next expedition, which hopefully will be imminent. So I'll be doing my modest bit for you on that. And I can hear the clock striking one outside. So with great reluctance, I think we have to tear ourselves away from you, Phil, and to thank you, and to bring up a slide that I know that everyone will love, because everybody loves dogs. So our final slide. And in the meantime, I don't think that any one of us who have listened to you will ever complain again about our various little mishaps and misfortunes. And you've certainly invoked such a sense of value of life in channeling what you've learned through your own experiences, and your energy and your vigor in helping others, and coupled with the most remarkable humility as well. And we were all enthralled by your earlier feats as well, and we really wish you well. We'll be following Brit, wish you well in everything you do here on, and with huge amount of respect and gratitude. Thank you, and goodbye for now, Phil.
Thank you, Rosie. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening.